Welcome, everybody. I'm Karl Wells. My guest today is a broadcaster, these days a radio broadcaster. In fact, he is the co-host of Your VOCM Mornings on VOCM Radio. He's also somebody with a very keen interest in history, especially the entertainment history of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I would venture to say, yes, I would, he is probably the world's leading expert on the life of Harry Hibbs. It's my pleasure to welcome Russell Bowers to the program. Welcome, Russell.
Karl, an absolute honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here. Now, tell me, why such interest on your part in Harry Hibbs?
For my 8th birthday, which was back in the 70s, my mother took me to Charlie Collins and Sons, which was the department store on Town Square on Bell Island. And because of my birthday, I could pick out any record I wanted from the little rack of records that they had. And I'm pretty sure I was probably directed for this record here.
Right there,
and
at the Caribou. Harry Hibbs at the Caribou Club.
Yeah, this was basically one of the great records of the era, and I bought it. I think my mother made it very clear that Harry was from Bell Island as well. So I got that for my 8th birthday, and we had a silver tone record player. It was kind of the iPod of its time. You could actually stack 20 records on the spindle, and they would drop down each side, and it would automatically play each side for you. My father bought it for $119 from Eaton's in 1959, and it was the family record player. I still have it. I inherited it from him. But that record got a lot of play. And so when you flip over the back of the record, of course, you'd see that Harry was from Bell Island. And that was different even then. You know, like I might go out and buy an Elton John record, but it doesn't say on the back he's from Kilbride or whatever, right? So it created this connection. And I just loved this music. And I'm a bit of a completist, so I would run around town trying to find, every time we were in St. John's, we were living on Bell Island. Every time we would come into St. John's, shop at Woolworths or the arcade or Kmart, you'd rummage around to see if you could find a Harry Hibbs record that I didn't have.
So, have you learned anything about Harry Hibbs's growing up years on Bell Island?
Yeah, he, son of a miner, as so many were, and he was born in 42 on a now auspicious date of September 11th, 1942. But he was also born about 10 days after one of the iron ore ships got sunk by one of the German U-boats. So he had that kind of, entry into the world. And as a little kid, he looked up to his brother Brendan. And his brother Brendan played the accordion. His father played the fiddle mostly, but he also played accordion. And Harry himself, as a little kid, kind of became obsessed with the accordion. And when it wasn't around, he would take a piece of paper and fold it up to make it look like an accordion, and he'd just pretend to play that. And so he had a keen ear for all the songs that were being played around the house and could remember these songs. And I think he had a little 4-stop accordion that he played for the most part, not the classic Horner that most people know him for.
I was going to say, this is a particularly hard accordion to play. It's the button accordion.
Yeah, and also he learned to sing by playing accordion as well, which was very unusual for players at that time. Typically, accordion players were instrumentalists. There weren't a lot of singing accordion players. It's a little more common today. You know, you have people like Ray Johnson from Buddy Wass's Name and the Other Fellas, and I can't remember his first name, but Foster from Foster and Allen plays and sings at the same time. So it was a little bit different at the time for him, but Harry just became transformed and transfixed by these sounds, and so these songs stayed within him. And so when the mines closed or started to close down, his father died in 1960. So the family was kind of his mother and Harry, and he had a younger brother around, so they were kind of at a loose end because there was no pension from the mine or any sort of substance. Like Harry was making a living cleaning up one of the nightclubs on Belle Island just to kind of make ends meet. So anyway, the family decided to move to Toronto in 1962, and the music stayed with him.
Okay, so he never actually got to play in any of the nightclubs or halls on Belle Island.
No, it wasn't one. It wasn't something that he aspired to do, thought to do. He played around the house, would play when friends or family were over, but he was not a performing musician at all anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, it didn't. It only happened on a night in 1968, early '68, and there was a Newfoundland dance at a place called Crane Plaza in Scarborough, and about, I'd say, 1,500 people were there. And at the time, you have to remember, in Toronto at that time, there was no radio playing this music. There was no internet to get it from. In fact, for a lot of the Newfoundland immigrants who were living in Toronto in that area, I mean, they hadn't heard this music since they left. And where were they hearing it? In the kitchens, and in the dance halls and so forth. So they had been living in Toronto in these places for about 10 years and hadn't heard this music. You were hearing maybe Newfoundland bands playing country music. Dick Nolan made a fortune doing Johnny Cash sound-alike records, right? So a lot of the Newfoundland acts were playing country music. If they were playing a song about Newfoundland, it was a country song. So Harry gets up at this dance in Scarborough, and all he knows is Squid, Jig, and Ground, and Eyes the By, and Road to the Isles, and all this kind of stuff. So they sort of got him up on stage. I can't remember if he was in crutches, was in a wheelchair, but he needed assistance to get up on the setting that they had. He got up, they stuck a microphone in front of that accordion, he played Squid, Jig, and Ground, and the place went up. People hadn't heard this song in 10 years. We can't imagine that today. Like all this stuff is at our fingertips now. So there was just this massive outpouring of response for him.
Okay, so I think you may have answered this question already, but I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
He was a musician, a singer. Was he a composer?
Not so much. He definitely knew tunes. There's a handful of songs tunes that are credited to him. So Brendan's Favorite, which is a tune he wrote for his brother. There was a song that he wrote lyrics for called Memories, which was, again, that wistful notion of missing home and growing up on the island. And I think there might have been one or two other, Margaret's Merriment, which was a song that he wrote for his mother, a little tune that he wrote for her. So there's a handful of them, here and there.
So your favorite of all his songs is the Belle Island song.
It's up there. It's up there. The Belle Island song kind of has a place in not just Harry's history, but I think in the grand context of Newfoundland and Labrador music. So the song itself actually was written by a gentleman named John Churchill. And I believe his sister, Lorraine Cal, was my music teacher in grade 3 on Belle Island. So John Churchill, in the late 60s, wrote this song. And the Belle Island song is very much about the end of the mines, the downturn in the economy, the depression not only economically but also of the people. And so John is on a cliff overlooking the Belle Island ferry terminal. And Harry's Lookout is now the place where that cliff is today. And John is looking out at either the John Guy or the Elmer Jones, which were the two main ferries at the time, that were basically people packing up their cars, getting on that boat, one-way ticket. And they were making their way to Toronto or flying up there or whatever the case may be. And so this song is this wistful and nostalgic look at the idea of these people going away, and God give me the power to change the tides some way and let them live their lives again back home in Conception Bay. It perfectly encapsulates that idea of the Newfoundlander that just wants to come home, or the folks at home who just want you to come home.
So he's in Ontario. Is Scarborough home base for him?
I think mostly Toronto. They had a an apartment right in Toronto. I want to say it was in the Lakeshore area, but his mother, his brother all kind of have a place there, but it's like so many Newfoundland houses, there's people coming and going all the time. And so he gets this break playing at this dance in Scarborough, and by chance, there's a fellow there who's a private detective working in Toronto, but he's also from Belle Island, and his name is Ray Kent. And Ray doesn't want to be in this business anymore. He doesn't want to be a private detective, but he always has this dream of getting into music. So he sees Harry playing, and he sees the response to Harry. So Ray decides he's going to organize another Newfoundland dance. And so he puts another one off, and this time 3,000 people show up. And Harry is the main attraction. And people show up.
Before, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. I just wanted to ask you this. Harry, obviously, up to that point, had to have a day job.
Well, yes. He was working in a couple of different factories.
Right.
To make ends meet. So the family goes up there in 1962, so he's like 18 years old, I think, at the time, 1920. And he gets a job in factories, and so that's kind of what he's doing. And he's working at this one factory, and he's making 80 cents an hour. So he gets another job. I believe the company was called Wells Manufacturing, and he gets a job there for like $2 an hour. Big jump. So I don't know if the training is as good as it could have been, but about 2 weeks into the job, he's working on a press machine, and it somehow comes loose from its moorings and falls on him. And it crushes both his legs.
Terrible accident.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think this is an era of workers' comp or anything like that. So it takes him months to recover. And it happened in December of 1967. So, from what I gather, you could hear the screams from the other side of the factory when it happened.
That's why he always played sitting down.
Yeah, because it did compromise his legs for the rest of his life. I mean, he didn't really have a lot of walking problems, but standing for long periods of time, especially for like a 2-hour concert or whatever it happened to be, was difficult. So whenever you saw Harry playing, typically it was on that stool or on a chair somewhere, because it was just the most comfortable way for him to play. And so he was recuperating from this accident when the opportunity came to play at that Newfoundland dance.
And now, let's talk about his management.
Yes.
Ray.
Yes.
There was some talk that Ray probably wasn't the best manager he could have had, and that maybe Ray took a little bit more off the top than he should have. What do you know about that arrangement that he had with Ray Kent?
I talked to several people who were around Ray, and one fellow was Bill Gilliland, and he was the artist and repertoire manager at Arc Records, where Harry recorded most of his most famous records. Bill signed him to that record deal.
I think this was Joan Morrissey's label, too.
I think just about all kinds of Newfoundlanders were on Arc at some point. Fisherman's Boy by Dick Nolan came out on Arc. So it was definitely a go-to label for East Coast artists in Toronto. And so Bill signed Harry because he had Ray Kent. And Ray was called the P.T. Barnum of Canada. And at the time, Ray became fairly well known for his ability to get Harry out there and to get the gigs and to get the record deals and all this kind of stuff. I interviewed Bernie Finkelstein, who was Bruce Coburn's manager. And I said, do you remember Ray Kent? He said, oh yeah. I said, we knew about Ray. We knew about Harry. We had no idea how he was doing it, but everybody in Toronto wished they were getting the success that Harry had. And so Ray, his only example to go by to be a music manager was Colonel Tom Parker, who some folks may
Not the best role model.
Not necessarily, no. Like Ray, Colonel Tom was great because, he would be out front selling the I Love Elvis buttons, but then he'd have someone over off to the side saying, I hate Elvis buttons. But he made them both and took money from both. So, but Colonel Tom's deal with Elvis was 50%, which is quite high if anybody knows anything about management. 10, 20 is kind of the norm. But Colonel was getting 50. And so Ray, he figured, well, Harry and I will be in business. I got to do a lot of work. Harry does a lot of work. We'll split it 50-50. So it was primarily the stuff from the club, the stuff from some of the gigs and so forth. And Harry was fine. He didn't know any different. So he thought, yeah, Ray's putting in a lot of work. I'm not going to go out there and book these gigs. So, you know, he thought he was making out great. So for the 5 years that they were together, that was the deal. But I did ask Bill Gilliland from Arc Records, what was Harry's deal? Like, what was his cut of the royalties? Because everyone said Harry got no money from the records. And he said, well, Harry's deal was the same as everybody else's. We'd sign you forever and pay you nothing. But he said, what you have to remember is that these records sold at half price. So if the Beatles were out with Sgt. Pepper for $4.99, Harry was there for $1.99 or $2.99. And he was getting about 20 cents a record. So if you got a record selling, 100,000 copies, sure, you're going to get about 20 grand. But he said, even in those days, he said, they'd go through that like butter. And Harry was also very, very generous to a fault.
We have to talk about the Caribou Club.
Yes.
What role does the Caribou Club play in all of this?
Well, in the ancient history of Belle Island, there was a place called the Exiles Club. And so people used to commute to Belle Island. And so when they were there after work, or if they had to stay during the week, they set up a little club there for people visiting from Conception Bay or Harbor Grace or whatever. And it was called the Exiles Club, and everyone would go there for a beverage. In Toronto, Ray had kind of the idea to reopen the same idea for people who were away from home living in Toronto. So in December of '69, he opens up the Caribou Club. And this became a hive for people from Newfoundland to see their friends, see the folks from home, or meet people that they didn't know from home. Now they know them because they're all up in Toronto.
Whether you're from St. Andrews or Sudbury, the Codroy Valley, or to Ottawa Valley, you're set for a half hour of fun and music right here where people really enjoy themselves at Caribou. It's a mighty fine place, and here's Harry to tell you all about it.
Harbor Race is a very nice place, and so is the Bay of Islands. We'll get a treat cheers with Harboneer when the boys come home from Swan. I like to sit by the big hot stove and watch the kettle boiling. Daddy will buy the baby a frock when the boys come home from Swan. Harbor Race is a very nice place, and so is the Bay of Islands. We'll give treat cheers with Harboneer when the boys come home from Swan. Uncle Georgie, he's her mate, and Billy, our commander. When the great big sea washed over, he and drowned a Newfoundlander. Harbor Race is a very nice place, and so is the Bay of Islands. We'll give treat cheers with Harboneer when the boys come home from Swan.
Going back to Ray Kent, isn't he responsible for Harry's costume? The salt and pepper cap and the leather vest?
Yeah, I found the first publicity photo that Harry ever took. And it's funny because he's in, those Pierre Cardin suits that the Beatles used to wear?
Yeah.
So that's what he's wearing. And he's holding his little accordion and, and he's no hat, nice haircut, and he's got the suit, tie, the whole 9 yards. And it's an ordinary, Pierre Cardin suit. So he wears this, and after a little while, Ray goes, you don't look like a Newfoundlander. So he comes up with the idea of putting Harry in just a plain white shirt, no tie, open collar, a vest, brown or black vest, pair of gray slacks, pops a pipe in his mouth. Harry doesn't smoke a pipe. And puts the Donegal tweed cap on his head. Now you look like a Newfoundlander. And that image there was essentially created by Ray Kent, and it became the image. Like, you put a salt and pepper cap and an accordion on, and everyone knows you're channeling Harry.
It's a Newfoundland stereotype, isn't it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
It became the stereotype to some degree.
Russell, we have to give Harry his props because, look, he was not just successful, he was phenomenally successful. Gold records.
Yeah.
And in fact, he made Canadian recording history. Talk about that.
Well, Harry Brown, who obviously we remember from his
Yes.
days on broadcasting for CBC, he was hosting a metronome, a show called Metronome on CBC Radio. He interviewed Harry one night, and he said the statistic was that Harry was outselling every single Canadian act in 1968-69 2-1.
Amazing.
Outselling Joni Mitchell, outselling the Guess Who, outselling Gordon Lightfoot, all of them combined 2-1. His record, if we could find the official stats for it, this is sort of the hard part of that era, is that it would still stand as one of the 10 best-selling debut albums of all time. And so it was important, not just from the point of view of a recording industry, that someone once said, like, before there was anything, Harry was an industry unto himself. And so he was important in the Canadian music mosaic. He was showing up on the Tommy Hunter show and all these national platforms. And what he was really doing, I think, was establishing the idea of a respectable, entertaining Newfoundlander in the national mosaic at a time, and many people forget this, Newfoundlanders were not the most welcome new Canadians for the first 20 years of Confederation. And we all remember the stereotypical jokes, and you'd see fences in Toronto spray painted with "Newfie, go home." We were the ones coming in and taking the jobs.
Did Harry have anybody in his life? Did he have a romantic partner?
That's sort of part of the enigma of Harry Hibbs. There were all kinds of rumors that were going around at the time of his death in 1989. One of them was he was the first AIDS victim in Newfoundland history. And then someone said, oh no, I think it was a heroin overdose and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I started broaching that subject with a whole bunch of people when we were working on this documentary, myself and Glenn Tilley, I hasten to mention, because he's a big part of me getting back into this story.
Radio producer.
Radio producer Glenn Tilley. Yeah, there's two Glenn Tilleys, CBC related. The radio Glenn is a great music historian in his own right. But I would start talk to different people in Harry's life, and I would just say, did you ever see Harry with a girlfriend, boyfriend, anything? And I said, Harry never really gravitated to anyone, So I was trying to find out as delicately as possible, because you don't want to accidentally say something that you shouldn't say. When we did the documentary and it was over and put to bed, Marty Hibbs, Harry's brother, very helpfully said, oh, by the way, did you talk to Kay? I was like, who Kay? Catherine Dad was Harry's fiancée.
Wow.
For 7 years, last 7 years of his life. And so I said, oh, okay, so where's she? I thought, up in Ontario somewhere. Oh, no, she's over on Bell Island. Okay. So I tracked her down, called her up, and I said, would you mind if I came over for a visit? And she said, sure, and dropped in, and she was remarkable. She had all his records. They were all signed to her. And she had pictures up, and not a shrine, but certainly it was a good memory for her. So she told me that she was working in the factory that December of 1967. She also worked at Wells Manufacturing, and she was one of the people that heard the screams from the other end of the factory floor. And she was kind of in that orbit, but she had gotten married and she had her own kids, and so she had her own life for several years. But then she kind of came back into Harry's orbit around 1982. She was a bit older than him, I think, but they just became fast friends of the family, and then they fell in love and got engaged. So I said, okay, great, So, and then I said, because I kept hearing Harry might be gay, and she said, well, we never consummated the relationship. I said, okay. And she said, well, one of the reasons why is that when Harry had that factory accident in 1967, it did crush his legs. It made it uncomfortable for him to walk long distances. But she said it also, as she said, ruined his manhood. So he was never able to have sex with anyone at all in the years after. And she talked a bit about how that affected him, because he still had affection for people, but it was nothing he could consummate. And just imagine for a moment you've got a massive music star, and he's up on the stage, and people are fawning all over him when he gets off the stage, and he's getting attention, but he can't actually follow up on any of it. And that, I think he was predisposed to alcoholism anyway, because everyone knows the story about Harry and his drinking problems and everything. But I think what drove it for him for many years was the fact that he would get off the stage, he'd get all this attention, but then knew he couldn't follow up. So he started to drink to cope with that. And so one of the great ironies of Harry's life, Kay was saying that, everyone thought Harry was a drunk because he was nervous on stage or whatever the case may be. Harry drank to cope with getting off the stage, which is a very different way to go about life. Most people, doing this on a stage is not normal for most people, right? And for Harry, he was okay when he was on the stage because he was playing music he loved. It was getting off the stage that was the problem. So she kind of opened up that part of his life.
Yeah, we all live complicated lives.
In his case, yeah, it was a very complicated life and a tremendous legacy left behind.
But he certainly was one of the greats.
He was.
One of our greats. And I want to thank you for being on the program and telling us Harry's story. Thank you very much, Russell.
Karl, an absolute honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay, you're welcome. And that's it for this edition of Karl Wells Point to Point. Please join us again next time.
I'm Wendell Clark with a word about winning. We all know it takes a team effort in any sport and with any challenge. You can be a part of the winning team that shuts out impaired driving. Whether you're out on the town or just hanging out with friends, drink responsibly. Always have a plan for a safe ride home for yourself, your family, and your friends. You'll be helping to shut out impaired driving.
Visit ArriveAlive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
Johnny wanted to go back home. It was 1,000 kilometers away. They forced him to go to the Indian residential school. More than 150,000 of us children had to go. They wanted to change us.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name.
Hallowed be your name.
Thy kingdom come,
Thy kingdom come,
thy will be done.
thy will be done.
Kill the Indian and the child.
Come here.
It's been called cultural genocide. I survived residential school. My brother Johnny did not.
Chani Wenjack was one of thousands of children who died due to Canada's residential school system. More than 80,000 survivors and their families still live with its legacy today.
The regulars, the guys who keep this place in business. Last week, they had something to celebrate. Jason had just finished university. So they toasted his profs, his TAs, his old roommates. Well, they toasted just about everyone. But I worry about and take care of my guys. So even when I know they're not driving,